Hello, my Nimians, and welcome to the horrors of Halloween. I never really watched horror movies as a kid, and so I've never seen the classics. So that's why I decided I would do a video reacting to 10 classic horror movies for the very first time that I'm seeing for the very first time. 10 classic horror movies. Giving my thoughts, and at the end, ranking them. So, without further ado, let's get into this. There will be timestamps for when I'm talking about each one in the description. If you want to skip to a specific movie, they will all be, I will talk about each one of them in order of the year they came out, and then at the end I'm going to do a quick ranking. So, my very first ever Halloween special video is here.
Spooky, scary skeletons and shivers down your spine. Shrieking skulls will shock your soul, seal your doom tonight.
Alright, so to begin our descent into madness, I began by watching Psycho from 1960, directed by Alfred Hitchcock. Yes, I had to think of his name for a second there. And this is sort of known as one of the greatest horror movies of all time. It has inspired many movies in the future and all that good stuff. Now, what do I think of it watching it many, many years later? I think it is pretty darn good. I think it deserves a lot of the credit that it gets. Now, did I personally feel any sort of horror from the movie? Did I personally feel any sort of anxiety from anything? Not particularly. I mean, now, keep in mind, I knew the twist at the end. I knew all that stuff going in. So it was just sort of, you know, I already knew how it was going to end. So it was just getting there that was like, okay, seeing how it got there. What I will say is the number one best thing about this movie is, what's his name? I can't remember his name. The actor who plays Norman Bates is amazing in this. Amazing character. Just he pulls off everything so well. At the beginning, he just seems like this just timid guy who's, you know, just kind of nervous but likable at the same time, but likable and kind of sweet at the same time. But you slowly start to see things escalate from the famous shower scene, which is when the character who starts off as the main character, but halfway through the movie kind of switches, so she's like not anymore. It's very interesting. Starts off following her till she gets to the Bates Motel, and then she dies. Really interesting sort of framing in that way. Like, you start off, you're just following this one random chick, and then she dies, and then she's not in the movie anymore. I don't know. Overall, really good. Great twist, even though I saw it coming because I already knew the twist, but I can see how well the twist was set up otherwise, and if I hadn't known the twist, I probably would have been like, oh my god. I probably would have been surprised by it. I probably would have found it a great twist if I hadn't known it. I could see it was very well set up and all that, so definitely classic horror movie. Amazing score, you know, very famous music. So there you go. Love Psycho.
Spooky, scary skeletons and shivers down your spine. Shrieking skulls will shock your soul, seal your doom tonight.
So, if a man who takes on the mind of his mother as a second personality isn't creepy enough for you, let's talk about the creation of the zombie movie with Night of the Living Dead, 1968. There's a breakout of these bodies that come back to life, dead bodies coming back to life to feed on human flesh. No one knows what's causing it. Turns out it's actually a virus of some sort. But anyways, first time I've ever seen this movie. It is legitimately a very good horror movie. It keeps you sort of confined in one place throughout the whole movie inside this one house. It starts off with one woman and her brother going to visit their grandfather's grave, I believe, or their father's grave. Can't remember specifically. they see a man in the distance. Turns out he's a zombie, and he tries to kill the brother. Tries to kill the sister, but then the brother comes in to save her, and the brother ends up getting killed, and the sister runs away to a house, meets this guy who helps her out. She's like completely just distraught through this. She's like in shock throughout most of the movie. And it turns out there's other characters in the cellar. This whole thing escalates. It's their constant fight for survival in this one house. But the thing that makes it interesting is there's some conflict within the people there. Like, the one guy's like, hey, we should just hide in the cellar and wait for somebody to come for us. But the one guy's like, we can't just hide in the cellar because there's only one way in, one way out. We need to hide up at the top. He's like, yeah, but we won't be able to secure the top of the building as well. A lot of people start to side with him, the guy who's like, yo, we need to stay in the top and not hide in the cellar. And then eventually they find on the TV that they can go to like a relief station, but then like the one guy's like, no, it's too dangerous. The one guy's like, no, we have to. And then it all escalates until eventually like the one guy gets killed by the other guy, and then everybody's just dead except for the one guy who finally decides to lock himself in the cellar. And the next day, a group of militiamen that was set up before they come in, you know, with their guns, killing all the zombies at this house. And he comes up and they see him. He starts like walking, peeking up. They see him. They think he's a zombie. Shoot him in the head. He's dead. Every single one of the main characters in this movie are dead at the end. That is something I actually honestly did not expect that. Especially in a movie that came out in '68. I feel like killing off every single main character, I feel like that's just a weird thing even for that time period. I don't know why. I mean, not that I've seen a lot of movies from that time period. It just seems like a really strange choice. I'm not saying it was bad. To be honest, this guy maybe at this point maybe deserved to die. I mean, he tried his best to help everybody, but at the end I think he started to realize that they probably would have all survived had they made the decision to lock themselves in the cellar, because what happened was he locked himself in the cellar, and then the people came the next day, and they probably would have been able to all survive had that happened. And a lot of interesting things. This is technically the first zombie movie ever. They never use the word zombie, but, you know, that's what they are. It started a series, which apparently continues on with other characters and stuff. Directed by the same guy, Romero. I forget his name, George Romero. There we go. There's the director. I didn't actually know this. I've heard of the other movies in the series. I didn't know they were all part of the same series, because you have Dawn of the Dead, which is the next one. Then you have Day of the Dead. And then there's even more after that, I think. Like 3 more. There's 6 up to one. The latest one apparently came out in 2009, I found out. Like, this is a series that's been slowly adding a new movie every once in a while. Like, is George Romero still doing them? Or was just the first 3 George Romero? I don't actually know, because I was trying to find out more information on it. Very interesting. I did not know that those were actually... Like, I've heard of those other movies like Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead. I did not know they were part of this same series of Night of the Living Dead. So that's very interesting to find out. I'll have to watch those movies at some point. But anyways, yeah, Night of the Living Dead, first ever zombie movie. Very good. And yeah, good zombie movie.
Spooky, scary skeletons and shivers down your spine. Shrieking skulls will shock your soul, seal your doom tonight.
Well, if a zombie apocalypse isn't frightening enough for you, how about a demon-possessed child? That's right, I just watched The Exorcist, and I actually love this movie. Probably my favorite out of the first 3 that I saw so far. Maybe not quite as classic as something as like Psycho, but I enjoyed it more. This is I love the slow buildup of it. It just starts and you kind of think this girl is like, just, you know, she's just having some psychological issues. She just needs a psychiatrist. It's fine. But as you progress, you realize there's something more going on, and maybe there's something demonic. And you realize she's possessed. And yeah, they get some Catholic priests to perform an exorcism. And boy, is the scene where they actually do the exorcism quite scary and just intense. And ends with both of the priests dying. Literally both of them. One of them gets killed by the demon-possessed child, as far as I could tell, and the other one causes the demon to go inside of him, and then he kills himself by throwing himself out the window. It was very intense, very just keeps your heart racing. You're just like, oh wow. In the end, the girl's fine, and everything's all right. But yeah, it's pretty scary stuff. You get a lot of interesting, just biblical things in terms of like what an exorcism is and what demon possession is. Very interesting stuff. Very entertaining as well. Again, I like the sort of slow progression of it. Also, this movie is very well shot and just well put together. All the actors are great. It's just a perfect horror movie. That's all I have to say. Like, I can't think of anything else to say about it. Exorcist, absolute classic. First time seeing it, but loved it.
Spooky, scary skeletons and shivers down your spine. Shrieking skulls will shock your soul, seal your doom tonight.
If a demon-possessed child doesn't make you shiver, then how about a teenage girl who, with telekinesis, who murders everyone at prom? Yeah, just watched Carrie. So this movie is about a girl named Carrie White. She's a teenage girl in her senior year, I believe. Yes, it's senior prom that they go to in the movie. And her mom is a bit, a bit crazy. She's like extremely religious, not just like your usual Christian who's like, whatever. No, she's like extremely religious. Like, I don't even know what's wrong with this woman. And that causes a lot of problems. Turns out Carrie, for some reason, has telekinetic abilities. It's some weird thing where apparently 1 in every billion person has it. I don't know. Something weird like that. But yeah, she's just a very, very shy girl. Just thinks, yeah, I'm just ugly and stuff because all the kids make fun of her. All the girls at school kind of like, joke around and make fun of her and everything. Yeah, but then turns out a guy actually asked her to prom. Not just any guy, a really, really, really cute guy. A guy that a lot of girls probably would want to go to prom with. And the reason why is because that guy's actual girlfriend, told him to. She was like, hey, she felt bad for Carrie and she legitimately wants him to go. It's all going great. You go to the prom, everything's going great until some cunt decides to play a prank on her, pour a bunch of pig's blood on her after she's after she gets elected prom queen. God, I hate that girl because you know what happens after that? Carrie, just everything in her mind, everything, all the being picked on by all the girls, her mom just being the way she is, everything just builds up in her head and she goes nuts. Uses her telekinesis, closes the doors. It's just mass hysteria. Everybody's freaking running. She causes a fire to go off. She freaking throws stuff around, kills some people. It's insane. It's an insane scene. But you kind of feel good about it when you're watching it because you know that a lot of these people that she's killing actually drove her to being like that. Some of them are actually terrible people. Not all the ones that die are, to be honest. Some of them probably didn't deserve it. But some of the ones that did do, and you're like, okay, I like to see them die. And then she goes home, hoping to get some help and sympathy from her mother. She's just devastated. But her mother, thinks she's like demon possessed or whatever and tries to kill her because her mother is just insane. Yeah, so guess what happens instead? She kills her mother. But then her telekinesis powers just completely go insane, crush the house, killing her and her mother. At least I'm pretty sure she's dead. Yeah, so that's the movie. I really enjoyed it. I think a lot of the earlier scenes had some of the just corny teenage high school drama elements that I found not the best. Um, but once it got into the good stuff, the sort of psychological stuff, people kind of playing with their mind and everything, and then just that end part, like the build up to the end was actually really good because during the prom, she's like having the best time of her life. It's like amazing. Like she never expected to go because nobody likes her. But then this guy, this really good guy, he's actually being good to her. Like he's actually, and I think he actually legitimately likes her and is legitimately having a good time with her and is legitimately like being a good guy to her and giving her the night of her life. It's amazing. And then these people just it's the build up. That's sort of the build up to the climax where you're like, you get in this zone where you just feel so good for her to the point where like I know what's coming. Like you see it coming because you see the setup. Like you see the characters like setting up the prank they're gonna play on her, and you're just like, no, don't do it. Like I'm legitimately there like, oh, I wish the movie would just stop right here and she'd be happy and it'd be good. Don't do it. And they do it, and all hell breaks loose, and there you go. A lot of fun, a lot of interesting stuff going on. So definitely see why it's a classic. So that's Carrie.
Spooky, scary skeletons and shivers down your spine. Shrieking skulls will shock your soul, seal your doom tonight.
A telekinetic prom murderer won't do it for you? Well, how about a psychopathic killer with nothing but a thirst for blood? I just watched the original Halloween. This movie is very iconic, very, very well known, obviously. It's the start of the slasher genre, which includes things like Friday the 13th and things like that. And how good is it compared to those other slasher movies? To be honest, considering all the praise it gets, it's probably one of the best. I mean, it is the original slasher movie, so I mean, whatever. It's probably one of the best. I haven't really seen any other slasher movies, so, But based on this movie, I'm not a huge fan of the slasher genre, mostly because it's just... I liked the movie, but other than, just a psycho killer coming to a town and killing people at night, there's not much more to offer in terms of the story. It's pretty simple, basic, laid out for you plot. And you get what you come for. Surprisingly, none of the deaths were all that graphic or anything like you'd expect from this type of movie. Although it is the original slasher film, so that's probably why. I mean, I'm assuming the Halloween films probably get even more just gory, memorable deaths as the series goes on. Maybe. I don't know. I know Friday the 13th has a lot of really interesting, memorable deaths. Again, haven't seen that series either. I don't watch horror movies. We all know this. That's why I'm doing this series. So, yeah, there you go. Halloween. Classic. But, not really my kind of movie. But I still enjoyed it.
Spooky, scary skeletons and shivers down your spine. Shrieking skulls will shock your soul, seal your doom tonight.
Well, if all those don't do it for you, I got something even scarier than all of it. Jack Nicholson. Yes, I just watched The Shining. And I can see why it is hailed as one of the greatest of the horror movies and why it is such a classic. It is the second Stanley Kubrick movie I've ever seen, the first being A Clockwork Orange. And I can see why he's considered such a great director. The movie is based off of the Stephen King novel, but it's not really anything like a Stephen King movie, typically. It sort of takes the idea of it and does Kubrick's full interpretation of it. This is 100% a Kubrick movie, despite the fact that it is based on Stephen King's work. And I loved it. I loved the sort of slow descent into madness that Jack has. Or Jack. Yeah, Jack, that's his character's name. Jeez, I thought it was something else for some reason. Very interesting, very creepy, sort of builds that suspense better than probably any of the other movies I've seen so far. Honestly, probably better than any movie I have ever seen. Really builds the horror suspense. And yeah, loved it a lot. So The Shining, obvious classic, so great.
Spooky, scary skeletons and shivers down your spine. Shrieking skulls will shock your soul, seal your doom tonight.
Crazy Jack Nicholson isn't enough to really get you going. Well, what about evil spirits coming to life in middle of the night, possessing people and trying to kill you? Here's The Evil Dead. So, going into this movie, I literally actually knew nothing about it, other than the fact that it's, really some of Sam Raimi's most famous movies, other than the Spider-Man series maybe. I guess that might be technically more famous. More people probably know about that. But, this is what really put that director on the map and really gave him a name. And also that Bruce Campbell is in it, something he was famous for. It's a series that made him famous. And now I see why. First off, the style is really good. Like I would say number one thing about this is just Sam Raimi's style. A lot of his angles are really kind of give you an uneasy feeling of gives these weird sideways angles and kind of awkward angles camera angles that really put you in an uneasy mood and really exemplify the horror aspect of it. Also, it's very creepy. It's sort of this idea they're just in this small cabin in the middle of the woods, and they basically can't escape because whatever demons there are possess the trees or something, and so the trees try to kill them so they can't escape. That's basically what happens, and then it slowly possesses each person. And Ash, the main character played by Bruce Campbell, by the end, is the only one who survives, So very simple setup, very simple basic horror setup, simple premise, but really fun and great for the style and just how stylized it is, the directing, and I think Bruce Campbell did a really good job. Earlier on, a lot of the acting was kind of typical horror movie cheesy acting, but Bruce Campbell really got good when it really got into it. It was really great. I've heard that the sequels, especially Evil Dead 2, is better than this, but I decided, I'm going to go with the original just because, I gotta, for this specific video. I'll probably talk about those movies, watch them eventually in the future, because I really do want to see the rest of the series. But, yeah, so there you go. Evil Dead.
Spooky, scary skeletons and shivers down your spine. Shrieking skulls will shock your soul, seal your doom tonight.
Bruce Campbell's performance didn't do it for you? Well, how about an alien creature who can imitate anybody perfectly, infiltrating a small compound in the Antarctic of 10 guys where there's no place for them to escape? I just watched The Thing. Now, this movie is directed by Carpenter, by same guy who directed the Halloween. Same guy who directed Halloween, interestingly enough. Turns out that he was a huge fan of the classic 50s movie The Thing from Outer Space, which is what this movie is based on. And that's why he wanted to direct it, as far as I can tell, because he was like, I'm a huge fan of that movie. Which is actually why in Halloween, they're watching that movie in it. They're watching The Thing from Outer Space in Halloween at one point. Which is just a fun little thing to look and see where people get their inspiration and how they work that in their new movies. I don't know, it's just a fun thing. So anyways, now we got The Thing. I like this movie a lot. So the idea is these people are in this in the Antarctic research facility in the Antarctic, and turns out there's some alien species there, and the alien species can sort of replicate human DNA and look and talk exactly like human, and basically turn themselves into an exact copy of one of the people. So the idea is some of the people are aliens, are the thing, what they keep referring to as the thing, but some of the people there aren't. But it's all about who is and who isn't, so it creates this sort of psychological battle going on, where like some of the people start to turn on each other because they think he must be one of the aliens, and then they're like, no, you must be one of them, and they're sort of like freaking out about it, and it sort of creates an interesting drama and a lot of interesting tension, because you as the audience, in fact, don't know which ones are which, like who's what. So you're like trying to figure it out too, and it really creates this interesting suspense. And then when the creature actually does come out, and like it's just the creature thing, it's pretty cool, pretty well designed creature, I have to say. But yeah, so The Thing, good movie, liked it a lot.
Spooky, scary skeletons and shivers down your spine. Shrieking skulls will shock your soul, seal your doom tonight.
After all that, and you're still able to fall asleep? Well, what if someone had the ability to terrorize and murder you in your dreams? This is Nightmare on Elm Street. So, this is one that I was actually quite excited to watch before, because I really love the concept of it, which is basically Freddy Krueger terrorizing children in their dreams. He can't really attack them in the real world, only in their dreams. But that's terrifying because, well, everybody needs to sleep. So, being afraid to fall asleep to the point where you don't want to fall asleep is actually terrifying. Because a lot of times you kind of accidentally fall asleep. You might go one night without sleeping, that's fine, but then you're tired and you kind of start to doze off, and it's just terrifying. The thought that, like, you think of sleeping as like a happy place, a happy just, you're fine, right, and safe, a safe, happy place. But this takes that away from you. This takes that away from the characters. That's the terrifying side of it. Also, Freddy Krueger is just a fun character played by Robert Englund, so, that's cool. As far as the kids go, teens, I guess, the teen actors go, they're fine. They're not particularly anything great, but not bad either. Johnny Depp is in this movie when he was a teenager, so that's kind of a fun thing to point out, I guess. So, but yes, I can see why it's a classic. I liked it. Interesting concept, done fairly well, so there you go. Nightmare on Elm Street.
Spooky, scary skeletons and shivers down your spine. Shrieking skulls will shock your soul, seal your doom tonight.
Now, to bring our horrifying journey to a close, we will talk about Silence of the Lambs. A movie that's maybe a bit more calm than the others for most of it, but ends with a very thrilling conclusion. A movie that is maybe even more terrifying than all the others. Mostly because of how realistic everything is. How these are actually somewhat based on truth stories, as far as I can tell. Hannibal Lecter was actually real, all that stuff. Also, it is a brilliantly acted movie. Brilliantly written. Just brilliantly shot, and everything, just the way it's put together is perfect. I loved this movie a lot. It's definitely going to be up there. It's one of my all-time favorites. Probably, maybe not in my top 10, but if I made a top 20 list of top 10, 20 favorite movies of all time, this would probably be there at least. Loved it a lot. Is it really horror, though? Well, I don't know. Is Hannibal Lecter horrifying? Is Buffalo Bill horrifying? Are these serial killers horrifying? I think most would say yes. So, yes, it is horror. And it's lovely. It's beautiful. I don't know. Like, this movie just... If I had more time, I could put more thoughts into it, but this is more of a first reaction, like I just finished watching the movie kind of thing. So definitely recommend this movie for anyone. It was perfect. Okay, so now that we're finished with all that, I finally saw these movies. Took some time to think about it and made a list, a ranking of all the movies. And I gotta say, it was difficult to do. It was actually really difficult to do because I really liked all of them. Now, some of them were easier to rank than others. So this list might shift over time, but for now, this is what I got. So, number 10, we have the worst of all of them, in my opinion, was Halloween, which came out in 1978. Next, we have number 9, which I put Carrie. Number 8, I put Psycho. Next up, we have number 7 on my ranking. We have Night of the Living Dead. For number 6, which I was thinking about putting this at number 7 and switching Night of the Living Dead and this, I have Nightmare on Elm Street. Then you move on to number 5. I have The Exorcist. Anyways, next up we have number 4, it looks like. I put Evil Dead. Next we have number 3 on my list. I put The Thing. Next we move to number 2, The Shining. Next we have number 1. I had to choose Silence of the Lambs. Great movie. So there's my ranking. I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you think of my ranking, But one thing I will say after all this, so, now that this is all over, what have I learned from this? What am I taking away from this experience? I guess, so since I've never really been big into horror, I've never really watched horror, I'm very, I'm not well versed in the genre of horror at all. I feel now like I know more about it. I'm more well versed in it. And in doing research and watching other people's videos talking about their favorite horror movies and stuff, I started to realize that I'm just scratching the surface with these 10. These are 10 of probably what are considered some of the greatest, but there's so much more out there. The horror movie, you could go back to like the 30s and find great horror movies. I don't know. I went back to the 60s. I went back to Psycho was the oldest movie I did, and that's 1960. You can go back further than that. You have like classic like the monster movies like Dracula and all that, and like the Hammer Dracula film reboot things, Hammer films, just so much things you can get into. Like I reviewed The Thing. I could review the movie that was somewhat based on, which is, what is it? The Thing from Another World, I think, from the 50s. I could review that. I don't know. There's The Fly. There's I don't know, the entire Friday the 13th series, I guess. That was one I specifically avoided because I felt like, Halloween was was the same type of genre, so I didn't want to do 2 movies in that same genre kind of thing. But I don't know, like there's just so much more for the genre to offer. But I appreciate it a lot more now. I think I overall just feel like I appreciate the art of horror, the art of the scare, of the building tension, of just making you feel fear. Movies, I think, are supposed to bring out some sort of emotion in you. A good movie does. And horror movies specifically target the emotion of fear. And ones that do that effectively, I think, is a very difficult thing to do. It's a very complicated thing to do. And honestly, here's something I want to do now that I've done this. I want to, by hopefully next Halloween, hopefully this will be my next Halloween special video for next year, possibly working on a script for my own short horror film. I've made a few short films in the past. Why not try horror? I mean, I don't think I will ever be like a horror director, or I don't think I'd be good at horror necessarily, but I kind of want to give it a try next year, maybe. So I don't know. It's kind of inspired me a little bit, I guess. So yeah, that's really all I have to say. This is probably me rambling on too long. The video's already long enough because I had to give reactions to 10 freaking movies. But yeah, so happy Halloween, everybody. Thanks for watching. Goodbye, my minions.
Hear these zombies shriek. We're so sorry, skeletons, you're so misunderstood. You only want to socialize.